Hey everyone, I'm Ari here with Rachel, and we're your hosts for the Merry Writer podcast. This week we're on episode 187, and we're asking, do you truly need a unique story idea? Before we dive into the topic, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening if you haven't already. And if you enjoy the show, please share it with friends and feel free to write a review. Okay, so talking unique story ideas. The short answer is no. There are no completely unique stories, in my opinion. Better throw in that caveat. Everything follows certain patterns and story types. There are common themes and tropes throughout almost all books and movies and the like. Most things are kind of like a rehash of the same things. You can usually see threads that are common through each different story. And in the end, it all comes down to how you tell the story that is what really matters. And it's not a bad thing. I mean, if you think about it, we're told when we're marketing to look for comp titles and books that are similar to ours, so that we can say things like, oh, did you like such a book? You might like ours. You know, it's used as a positive marketing tactic. There's a reason for that. People will seek out books that are familiar to other books that they've really enjoyed, and they will look for those tropes and those themes and story types. You know, if they really like quests or enemies to lovers, love triangles, found families, which apparently is Rachel's favorite. I have to admit, I love found families. It's a really good one.
Found family is the best.
Exactly. I mean, you've probably seen it on Instagram. It's a big thing on Instagram at the moment. If a new writer puts a book out, there's usually a picture of their book cover with lots of little curly arrows coming out because everybody's using the exact same graphic. And each of the curly arrows will state something that's in that book, whether it is found families, enemies to lovers, he falls first, only one horse. There's so many of these weird little things that are what readers are looking for. And that way they know instantly, oh yeah, this is probably a book I'm going to enjoy, or at least there's a bigger possibility I'm going to enjoy it. So yeah, I think if you're obsessing about finding the ultimately unique story idea, you might be missing out on just the cool ideas you've got that you can work into a different way if they're a little bit similar to something else. And there's things can be redone, they can be modernized. You can even go and take a modern story and shift it to like, oldie worldy, or like historical fiction or fantasy. And we'll go through a couple of them just because I want to. Screw it.
Well, yeah, I mean, we got to talk about something on the podcast.
Exactly. And like certain things, people don't always realize that certain books or movies are like either retellings or heavily inspired by, or kind of connected to. The one that stuck out for me was Pride and Prejudice, and also Bridget Jones's Diary, which is they're kind of similar. Now, they're not like a complete, a repeat of each other. One is set very differently, then you've got the more modern version, but they both start very similar. And we're not even talking about the fact that they've both got Mr. Darcy, okay? But they both start with the bad first impression with Mr. Darcy, where he's being a bit of a shit and says nasty things about the female protagonist. You've got the scoundrel, which is in Pride and Prejudice, it's George Wickham, couldn't remember his first name. And in Bridget Jones's Diary, it is Daniel Cleaver. I should remember that. I watched it recently. They both have very overbearing mothers. They both have like the kind of more subdued father who kind of just has to go with the flow. You've got the kind of where the two female leads end up kind of spending a lot more time with the scoundrels before they realize that they're scoundrels, and then how it ends. So they technically are very similar, and you could say it was very inspired by it, or it's a retelling. There's enough difference that it's not always that clear. I know people who didn't realize that there was enough parts of Bridget Jones's Diary that were connected to Pride and Prejudice. Doesn't mean that there's a ripoff. They're so different stories in their own way. One is set in like the olden times, and then you've got the modern version, so you have different things going on. So yeah, but both of those are still very popular. Both books, and obviously Bridget Jones's Diaries movie, and all the Pride and Prejudice movies, including the one with zombies, which I have to admit is one of my favorites. I just really love it.
Backtracking a little bit, I do agree with Ari that there are no unique story ideas anymore, because they're all the same story type. every book has the same foundation. Every story has the same foundation. And it just depends on the writer and how they decide to tell that story. That's what makes it unique and different from everything else. And I think the reason why people do that is because readers like what they like and they want more of it. It's reading books isn't the type of thing where you enjoy it and you're like, oh, wow, I want to try something new now. No, people look at like these tropes and they fall in love with them and they crave more of that trope. A good example of reusing these story types are fairy tale retellings, because fairy tales are universal and it's so familiar to readers that it's pretty much become its own genre. And an example of that would be Cinder by Marissa Meyer. Meyer?
I think it's Meyer.
Is it Meyer? Okay.
I don't know. I don't know her. I don't know.
I don't know either. I want to say Meyer, but a good example of that would be Cinder by Marissa Meyer, and which is a Cinderella retelling. And that's one that I actually did read. I own the book. Cinder is a sci-fi where Cinder works as a mechanic and is a cyborg with an artificial foot. She has the stepmother with the two stepsisters, and there's also a plague tearing through New Beijing, where the story is set. There's a prince, a ball, and a missing foot instead of the actual shoe. And it's different enough from the Grimm story or the Disney version of Cinderella, but people enjoy the Cinderella story, so they're just willing to read different versions of it. And I think it's just something that, I mean, Ari mentioned earlier that it's a good marketing tactic when you say, hey, I wrote a book that's very similar to this, this, and this. But there are just certain things that when you hear the word Lord of the Rings, people are like, oh, I love Lord of the Rings. I'm jumping on that. So yeah, I think it's just the familiarity of it that kind of makes it so that we don't have true unique stories anymore.
I understand why people, especially new writers, kind of want to write something more unique. And some of that is down to readers. And I say that as someone who was on Goodreads recently, and something I get really tired of seeing in reviews, I'm probably going to get creamed for this. I am tired of seeing somebody read a book that has one aspect that's similar to another book and then crap in the bed about it. Okay. And I'm going to give you the example. There is a book and it has a, like, you know, one of every person in this specific like kingdom comes together and they compete in a trial. Okay. And there were a few of the reviews where it's like, oh my God, it's another Hunger Games. It's like, why does everybody have to rip off Hunger Games? And I just want to say to these people, Hunger Games was not the first person, the first book or the first media to put a lot of teenagers together to fight to the death. If you haven't seen Battle Royale, go watch it. It's friggin' great. It's a bit brutal, but it's friggin' great. And I don't even think Battle Royale was the first thing to do kids put together by adults to fight to the death. And the book they were referencing didn't even fight to the death. You could pull out, you could be excluded. You didn't have to die. So it wasn't even like, oh my gosh, a lot of teenagers was thrown together. They weren't all teenagers. And it annoyed me because it was as if you couldn't have that one thing. It's literally like turning around going, oh my God, Battlestar Galactica, just copying Star Wars because they've both got starships. Are you kidding me? You've got to be careful because there are these people out there. And I'm sorry if one of you is out there and you're listening to this, but could you just stop connecting one aspect and going like, oh my God, it's, you know, this person is a wizard, so oh my God, you can't have another wizard character. Seriously, it just boggles my mind. I still see it with where people get annoyed if someone writes a kid going to a wizard or witch school and they go, it's Harry Potter. Have you ever heard of the Wicked Witch? Is it Wicked Witch? Is it Wicked Witch?
You mean from Wizard of Oz?
No, wait a minute, I need to stop. The worst witch.
I've never heard of that.
I'm sure it's, the worst witch. These were like when I was young, and I am an old person now. I am 42. The worst witch was out, and it was Yeah, which is going to a school. It's not unique. It's how the author tells the story. It's how they create characters. It's how they do the world building. It's not, oh my God, there's a spaceship in it. Oh my God, there's a vampire. Oh my God, there's a wizard. Oh my God, there's a trial where people die or people fight. You know, it's you can have this. And I actually see it a lot in movie reviews as well. And you get some people complaining about stuff. And it's like, have you seen all these action movies? It's almost seriously, just pull up every Jason Statham movie. Oh my gosh, let me guess. He is an ex CIA or SEAL or SAS person, or maybe he's a Green Beret for special forces, but he's living a normal life. And so somebody kidnapped his kid, his dog, his wife, his brother, you know, and he has to come out. It's literally, it's the same story all the time, but people enjoy it. So just, sorry, I get really on my soapbox.
I love it when you rant about movies, because like 95% of the movies you talk about, I've never seen. And it is just hilarious listening to you go on and rant about how good a movie is or how bad it is. And it's just, I enjoy it very much. But I want to like add to this that Ari is right. You can't have it both ways, because it's very easy for you as a writer to promote your book and say, oh, it's very similar to this type of story or this like popular novel by this popular author. And many readers will eat that up, but then you will have those readers that are like, oh, it's another one of this type of story. You can't have it both ways. You're not going to be able to please everybody. And I think the type of reviewers that nitpick that one little thing, that's not your audience. That's not the audience that you're aiming for, I guess is the word. Might be the right word. I don't know. Because I promise you that writers do not sit down and read a book or watch a movie and they're like, wow, that was amazing. How can I make this work for me? That's not what we do. We go to bed at night. We're in the shower and these random ideas just come to us and then we write them down. And yes, there are going to be similarities to other story types from books and movies and the like, because there are no true unique story ideas anymore. As Ari explained, it's the way that the writer builds the world and tells the story through the narrative and how they develop their characters and so on and so forth. So there are many unique stories out there. Pretty much every book out there is a unique book, but it's not necessarily a unique story.
No, exactly. That's it. It just rattles my cage that there's these readers out there that do that. And I'm sorry if you're one of them, and maybe you just had a bad day. But the idea of taking a book that was not, it wasn't written as a dystopian, it wasn't all about just teenagers, there were other adult characters in it, it wasn't a fight to the death, it had a different, like when whoever won, it was different, it was just, there was enough different pieces, and there should be, you know, don't wrong, if someone had written a dystopian fantasy and there were categories of people and they were, one of them was chosen and each was put into a fighting ring, it might be enough, but it wasn't. And it's just this kind of, I don't know, surface level thinking, just in a shitty mood today, that comes across. And I think it affects writers, especially new writers, where they feel like, oh my God, do I have to be better? Do I have to think something bigger and more intense? No, you don't. You know, you don't. Just as Rachel said, they're not your target audience. Just let them have a whinge in the reviews section and let it go. I mean, if it literally takes you to glance at one character and go, oh my God, or one aspect. I mean, I write vampires in one of my series. Does that make me copying Anne Rice? No. Am I copying, what the hell is she called? The Twilight author. Can't remember her name. Stephanie somebody. Is it Stephanie? Somebody. I don't know. Am I no, my stuff is different and other people's vampire stuff is different, and it's, you know, there are so many. Am I the same as Bram Stoker with his Dracula? No, there are differences, and the fact that there are a million vampire stories out there and we're still craving them, some of us who like vampire stories, you know, it just, okay, I'm going to step off my soapbox because I've been on there a bit too long, so we're going to move on. let's talk about some other retellings to give you more ideas. We're gonna go. Rachel seems to be dying right now. Are you okay, my dear?
It just took a wild turn, and
I know.
it's cracking me up.
I'm in a grouchy mood, and I'm bringing it to the podcast.
I love it. I'm here for it. Proceed.
As well as fairy tale retellings, which are extremely popular, another really popular one is Shakespeare retellings. And you may know this. I'm using movies because I like to use movies. I watch a lot of movies. So here are some Shakespeare retellings that people might not be realizing. 10 Things I Hate About You is obviously Taming of the Shrew. Forbidden Planet, which I learned, was The Tempest. Now, I've never read The Tempest, so I wouldn't have realized, but it has got enough pieces that sort of like overlay that it would be considered a loose retelling of The Tempest. I love Forbidden Planet. You have to watch it if you haven't seen it. The Lion King has like echoes of Hamlet. Men of Respect, Macbeth, and Warm Bodies, which I love. Zombie movie, if you haven't seen it, has some Romeo and Juliet themes. Freaking love Warm Bodies. So yeah, you can take these classics and these scripts and these screenplays and mythologies and fairy tales, and you can give them new life in different ways. And there is a market for it. People love retellings. So yeah, you don't have to worry about stressing out and getting like, oh my gosh, we have to go and get brand new, like unbelievably unique ideas. Just tell it differently.
I just have to say that out of the things that you just listed, I've only seen The Lion King and I've only read Romeo and Juliet. The example...
Rachel, you're killing me. What is going on? Have you not seen 10 Things I Hate About You? Seriously.
No, I haven't. And the only reason I read Romeo and Juliet was because I read it in school. So my example for Romeo and Juliet is to go watch Psych season 5, episode 1. Because that title of the episode is called Romeo and Juliet, and it's kind of based off of Romeo and Juliet, except no one dies. But when it comes to these stories, whether they're a movie or a book, or it came quote unquote first or not, there are 6 different story types. Is there more than 6? Or are we just thinking of 6?
There might be. These are the ones that I knew a few of these, and then I did some looking up and I found some others. There might be more, but these are typical story types. Obviously, if anyone has any knowledge of extras, put them in the comments.
Because there's got to be more than 6. If there's only the 6, that's pretty impressive that we have like literally billions of books out there. But, for the sake of this episode that has probably gone on way too long, we're just going to talk about like the 6 story types real quick. First, there's rags to riches, which everybody knows and may or may not love. And it's basically just moving slowly from a bad situation to a good situation. But then there's also riches to rags, and that's the reserve falling from a good situation to a bad one. And that's like... No, the only example I could think of is The Sweet Life of Zach and Cody. No, it wasn't even Sweet Life of Zach and Cody. Dylan and Cole Sprouse were in the movie, but I can't remember what movie it was. Yeah, forget it. All right, never mind. Don't listen to me, guys.
I could give one. Ophelia. Is it Ophelia? Wait, Othello. Sorry, Othello. If Shakespeare starts out good, ends bad, very bad.
I'll take your word for it because I don't know that one either. And then we have the Icarus story type, which is moving to something good, then falling or failing. Do you have any examples for that one?
Icarus, the story of Icarus.
Oh, duh.
They get out of the labyrinth, they go into the sky, and he goes too close and falls. So that's probably the best one to give.
Oh my gosh. Why am I reading this? Who gave me this job? What the... How do you pronounce number 4?
Oedipus.
Oedipus? That's an O.
Oedipus. As in like the Oedipus complex?
No.
Then you don't want to look into what Oedipus means and who Oedipus was.
Well, it's the fall, rise, and then falling once more, people. That's what it is. And then we have Cinderella, which we did already talk about. That's the rise, fall, rise. Because Cinderella is down on her luck. And wait, when did she rise? Like, how was she? Because she was already down on her luck.
I think of the original one, it's like her mother dies and then her and her father are happy. And then
and then
you know,
and then they go down.
Yeah, because then her dad dies, and
again.
she's because I think when she when the stepmother and the kids come, it's quite good, and then he dies, and she's alone with them. So I think it's a little bit. I think it's more I'd say the grim one, but the grim one's probably really bad. But yeah,
the grim one, yeah. I did read the original Grimm stories, and yeah, those are grim. You know, no pun intended, but they're grim.
It's the fact that someone took the grim fairy tales and went, you know what, we can Disneyfy them and make them great. And it's like,
exactly.
There you go. Perfect retelling.
Yay.
So different.
Oh my gosh. I got to wrap this up. Number 6, Man in a Hole. And that's the fall moving to the rise. But that's all I have to say about that, because I'm just reading Ari's notes.
Yeah, I went a bit crazy and put loads of notes in. So apologies.
I'm so sorry. Everybody who's listening to this, I'm so sorry.
No, but that's it. It's just to give you an idea of how the arc falls, you know. So it's, you know, moving from bad to good to bad, whether it's slow, whether it's fast, if it's a fall, if it's a rise. That's all it is. It's like most books can be put into that. And there have been studies where someone smart and some scholarly person has studied thousands of books and put them into these categories. That's why we have these 6. Again, there might be more, but that's the main set. And we can go and look onto story archetypes, which is probably one you've all heard, where you've got the rag to riches, the tragedy, the comedy, voyage and return, rebirth, overcoming the monster, and the quest. Again, most books can be put into these categories. The same with character archetypes, where you've got the hero, heroine, the sidekick, the shadow, the villain or antagonist, or both, I call it the lover. It used to be the damsel, but I'm so sick of female characters just being the love interest prize for some douchebag. So we're just going to say the lover or the love interest. And that way it can be for anybody. The mentor, the mother/father figure, the everyman, the scapegoat, and there's probably a lot more. When you start hearing these lists and seeing, oh yeah, the quest, the comedy, the voyage, you can instantly pick books you've read and go, oh yeah, I remember that book that was a voyage and return. You know, I remember that that book that had the mentor and the villain and the hero. I mean, bloody hell, that's Star Wars. You know, you could put that and match that against. And when you realize there are these very specific archetypes and these very specific stories that most books fall into, you start to realize there aren't really unique ideas, and it's okay. And I'm sure there's going to be someone going, I know of other characters and I've written a character that's so different. Yes, but the majority of them will fit into one of these categories, and that's okay. It's not a bad thing to slot your characters into these boxes. It's what readers kind of want. We are looking for books that have similarity to other books we like. That's a marketing trait. It shouldn't be sniffed at. It shouldn't be, oh my God, I have to write the most unique book ever. You could. There are some batshit crazy unique books out there, and they can do really well. They can also be those sorts of books that everyone knows about but nobody reads because they're like intense, which is a type of fame, I guess, if that's what you want. But it might not be what you can base a book career on. I'm guessing. I might be wrong. I don't know. But yeah, so this is a messy episode, and I'm probably going to keep a lot of this in, as Rachel said, just to show how bad our episodes can be.
I really think you should, because I mean, this is us, everybody. What you hear is what you get. I mean,
real and raw.
I should have read the story and the character archetypes, because I actually know.
Feel free to throw some notes in. Get some notes in there.
No, I don't. No.
Well, bonus episode.
Oh no, I was just saying, like, I should have read that specific part of the notes. You should have read the story types.
You wanted the story types.
No, I didn't want the story types. You were like, I've been talking for a long time. You should say something. Yeah. So I said, okay. Bottom line, which I think I already mentioned in this episode, but I can't remember. So I apologize if I'm repeating myself.
It's been like 8 years.
These archetypes, and the story types and stuff, it's all the foundation of a book. So like if you had something that was truly unique, you're going to give all your readers a culture shock, which may or may not be a bad thing because you could very well invent something new. But considering that books date way back in time, even if you do think of something that's like sounds really unique today, it probably isn't. Sorry to burst your bubble, but yeah, there's really no unique story ideas. It's just the way you weave them together.
It always reminds me of like when released by somebody and all the younger generation are like, oh my God, have you heard this song? It's like, it's not it's a cover, right? You get that, right? And you don't, because again, I've watched movies, I've listened to music, and I didn't realize they were covers of some. You're thinking, oh my God, this is the best song ever. And it's been redone 3 times, and the original was from like the 1940s,
Yeah, actually, why didn't we think of music earlier? Music is such a prime example of how like there are really no unique ideas anymore. It's not just book, it's not just story ideas. It's like it's also music too. I mean, obviously, yeah, people come out with unique songs like all the time because they write them, but even still, there have been songs, I can't think of any examples at the top of my head right now, but there have been songs where I'll listen to the beginning of the music and I'm like, oh, I know what song this is because it sounds exactly like this song. And then it's something completely different. And I'm like, oh, they have like very similar intros.
Yeah, like the riffs are the same and the beats are the same. You're like, wow, I don't know how you got away with that, but okay,
yeah.
Okay,
yep,
that's fine. We're finally gonna turn it over to you guys. Do you have a favorite type of story? Did you even know there were types of stories? Let us know your answer in the comments. Let us have a chat about it. Remember, we do release episodes every Wednesday. Next week, we ask, how do you launch a successful series? And we have a special guest joining us. To ensure you don't miss it, hit the subscribe button on the way out. As always, thanks for listening to the Mary Writer podcast, and we'll see you next week. This podcast is brought to you by Reams of Paper, We're Killing Trees. The music, titled Inspired, is by